alive in the world. Oh, so I, our hope is that, all of our friends who join, they feel that there's something in these meetings for them, even if they haven't signed up, to be a Hare Krishna. They're not wearing the uniform, but they can feel that, oh, this is relevant to me. And that's what we appreciate about Krishna consciousness, that we feel it's not a sectarian concern. This isn't a religion of some limited ideal and limited conception, but it is dealing with the most universal perspective of religion, God, approach to the divinity, and also how we can practice and apply these teachings here and now. Mike has written a question. Gangalila, would you mind answering that? Because I don't know German. And essentially, it is a treatise on yoga. It is a discussion on yoga, different types of. Okay, well, without further ado, let's go into back. So we left off on the peace formula, chapter 5, verse 29. Bhoktadam yagyatapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram suhridam sarvabhutanam gyatva mam shantim richati. And it mentions these three principles by which anyone can attain peace in their lives. And we discussed the first two before we got hacked, and then we cut off, and then we rejoined, and we discussed the third one. But I'll go over the third one again because not everyone was here for that. But we can review the whole thing. So what are those three principles which will allow us to achieve peace? Number one, Bhoktadam yagyatapasam, that we will accept that we are not the center, that the purpose of existence is not for our enjoyment, but rather we are one part within an organic whole, a whole comprised of many different parts, and we have one part to play within that system. It's not revolving around us. There is a higher center. Thank goodness for that, right? Thank goodness it doesn't revolve around us. Thank goodness we're not the be all and the end all, right? So we will accept that we are not the enjoyers. Krishna, the Lord, the higher divine center, he is the enjoyer. Everything is meant to be for the purpose of satisfying that higher center. Then we will be peaceful. Oh, things didn't go my way. That's okay. They weren't meant to. The goal wasn't for me to be number one in the first place. So it's okay. No need to be frustrated about that. No need to be frustrated that everyone is not bowing to my supreme authority. That's okay. So then second point, Sarvaloka Maheshwaram. I am Krishna speaking here. I am the Lord of everything. I am in control. There are no accidents. So he's saying, I am the supreme enjoyer. I am in control. I am the supreme Lord of everyone and everything in existence. There are no accidents. There's rhyme and reason and purpose behind everything. And then lastly, Suhridam Sarvabhutanam. I'm friendly to everyone. I'm affectionate to everyone. I love everyone. So everything that's going on in this world has some purpose behind it. And there's also friendliness behind it. He is not a vengeful Lord. He is not a cruel Lord. And nor is he an indifferent or powerless Lord. But he is in control. His power is behind everything. And his affection is also behind. So as Srila Sridhar should say, every wave is favorable. Every wave is favorable. His friendly glance is behind everything, although it may be difficult to see that. It is so. So we must try to see, where is our friend? Where is our friend in every situation that is coming to us? Every wave that's coming, it is a friendly wave. So there's no need to blame the environment for anything. We will see that There is order and there is affection behind everything, although it may be very difficult to accept that and to see that. It is so. And if we can accept that, we will be liberated. We will be liberated. So this is the last verse of the 5th chapter. The path of renunciation of action. Chinmoy Prabhu, do you want to add any thoughts to that?
I just really like the last bit where, he's the well-wisher of everyone. Dear friend. That's Krishna. The other ones seem like, there are other aspects of Krishna, but then in the end, he's saying, this is who I really am. Because I'm the well-wisher. I'm the one who wants the best benefit for you. The friendly aspect of the Lord.
Yes, yes. Yes, Krishna represents the sweetest, friendliest, most loving expression of the Lord. And that is the source, that is the highest, and that is the source of everything. Affection, love. The more, the more one advances, the more they will come into a personal conception of things. Everything will become more and more personal the more that we advance. And so the highest conception of divinity is the most personal and the most intimate and the most friendly. Consciousness, right? This is our disease at present, lack of consciousness. And we also were, this was actually a point that came up a few times in this chapter. It came up again, Chinmoy Prabhu. I remember you were appreciating it also earlier in the chapter was mentioned. Then the idea was repeated later last week. You weren't here. That this idea that the more one advances, the more sympathetic they become to others, the more caring they become towards others. So the more that one advances, the more conscious they become of the welfare of others and naturally become more compassionate and caring towards others. That is a symptom of true evolution of consciousness. Sensitivity of others. Okay, we can go on. Does anyone else want to make any comments or questions? Oh, Scarlett's also joined us. Great to see you, Scarlett. Hare Krishna. Hare Bol. Should we move on to chapter 6 then? And Tungarasa has also joined us. Okay, go on to chapter 6. Dhyana Yoga, the path of meditation. So let's chant these first 5 verses together in Sanskrit. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Anashita karma phalam karyam karma karoti yaha sa sannyasi cha yogi cha na niragnir na chakriyaha yam sannyasam iti prahur yogam tam vidhi pandava na hya sannyasta sankalpo yogi bhavati kaschana arudukshur mune yogam karma karana muchyate yoga rudasya tasyaiva shama karana muchyate yadahi nandriyarteshu na karma svanusajate sarva sankalpa sannyasi yoga rudasta dochyate udaret atmanatmanam natmanam avasadayat atmaiva hyatmano bandhur atmaiva diparatmanaha. Welcome to Seva Rupa, who's joined us from South Africa. Chinmoy Prabhu, do you want to read those translations up to verse 5?
The Supreme Lord said, know a genuine sannyasi and yogi as one who, without expectation of the fruits of his actions, performs his duties as prescribed by the scriptures. One is not a sannyasi merely by renouncing the performance of the fire sacrifice and other prescribed duties, and one is not a yogi merely by becoming physically inactive. Oh, Arjuna, that which is known as sannyas, complete renunciation, you should know to be yoga, since without renouncing fruitive desire, no one can be a yogi. For the yoga practitioner desirous of attaining steady yoga meditation, action is said to be the means. When he has achieved yoga meditation, renunciation of all action is said to be the means of remaining in meditation. When the yoga practitioner does not become attached to the object of the senses and to any action in pursuit of their enjoyment and renounces all thoughts of enjoyment, then he is said to have attained to yoga. One must elevate himself by the mind, not degrade himself by the mind. For the mind is sometimes the friend of the living being, and in another situation, that very mind is his enemy.
Mhm. Any thoughts, Prabhu, these verses?
Well, there's a lot here, so but he's touching on the idea that, like, to be really renounced is not simply a physical action, that it's a mental state, that you are no longer mentally attached to the fruits of your action, and that you're not attached to your senses. What your senses are saying they want, you are not controlled by that. You are controlled by something higher. And then the fifth one is very nice, and definitely very important for us, where we consider that the mind can be our best friend or our worst enemy. And in my case, definitely it's more towards the latter.
Mhm.
So how to become a yoga? How to become a yogi?
Mhm.
I think this is what is being described here, is how to have that type of renunciation and still be active in this material world.
Mhm. And it's really striking me here, like how much this point is emphasized. It's like again and again, almost in every chapter we've been through so far, this point is emphasized that what's to be strived for is not renunciation of activity or the world, but an internal state of renunciation. This is like, it's like almost like being hammered again and again. We have to learn to develop that inner consciousness and how we relate, but not to give up in an artificial way. This is repeated again and again throughout Bhagavad Gita.
And we can see in this context too, because who's he speaking to? What particular moment? He's speaking to Arjuna, who's about to go out and do battle, basically kill all his friends, his family. He's about to go out and do serious action. And so, Krishna is telling him again and again, don't be attached to the fruits of your action. Do your duty. The results are in my hand.
Mm-hmm. 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 And then I can also maybe add here this, one thing to remember in Bhagavad Gita is that there are different paths, right, and different yogas which are being described, and not all, and many of them, there's a lot of crossover. Many of them are also applicable in bhakti, but some of the instructions are more specific to traditional yoga practices like Ashtanga yoga and so on. So they're not all applicable. So for example, one of these is seen in verse 3, where it's saying that for the yoga practitioner who's desirous of attaining steady yoga, action is said to be the means by which one can achieve this state of yoga, which means, as it's also defined here, to be fully free from mundane desire, even while engaging with the world, to be internally detached. This is a state of yoga. So, but then it says here, once one has achieved this state of yoga, then renunciation of action is recommended at this higher stage of yoga development. Renunciation of action is recommended. So this is something which is not applicable in practices of bhakti. Because the goal in bhakti is pleasing our Lord in a mood of love, in a mood of devotion, to please the Lord, to please the devotees, to please the saints, with a mood of love, desire to serve, to please. It's something living, as we were saying just now, personal, right? Krishna consciousness, bhakti yoga, it's very personal. Sometimes when people ask me, why don't you do like meditation? Why isn't meditation emphasized? And I say, well, what if we're sitting there with our eyes closed and Krishna's hungry? Krishna wants something. Somebody needs something, and we're sitting there in some trance. What use is that? So it's very personal. Krishna consciousness is very personal. It's about a loving relationship. So there's no room for impersonalism at all. And then, as Chinmoy Prabhu mentioned, this verse 5 is especially important for us. And this verse, this Udared Atmanatmana, we are, for those who came a bit late, we're on beginning chapter 6, looking at verse 5. This Udared Atmanatmanam. This verse is fairly well known, within our community, and our Gurudev, he would quote this verse. He quoted this verse many times. And it's making this point that our mind is a tool. Our mind is a tool, and we can use it to go up or to go down. It's just that it's just a tool. It's an instrument, and we don't need to get caught up, with that instrument. We don't need to identify with that instrument or let that instrument take over. It's just a tool. And we have to train it. It's like a puppy dog. Maybe it was just last week we mentioned, like a puppy dog. A puppy dog can run wild around your house and pass stool everywhere and chew everything up, right? Or you can train the puppy dog to become your loyal friend, an assistant, companion. So our mind is like that. It is just a tool, and it can be our friend or enemy, depending on how we train it. So we have to, it's like sometimes I think of these like sniffer dogs, right, that you see in the airports, and they've been trained, drugs bad, right? So they could have been trained to seek out chocolate, right? Chocolate dog sniffers, right? But they've been trained to find drugs, but it could have been anything. They just have a particular capacity, and it's been trained to be used in a particular way, but it could have been in any other way. So our mind is also like that. Our mind can go anywhere, can do anything. We just have to train it. So, Krishna, good. Bhakti, good. Maya, bad. Selfishness, bad. Dedication, good. It's just like a training. And it's, and the test for this, the evidence for this is that we become attached to things that are not enjoyable, things that are disturbing. The mind becomes attached to, and there are experiments, and there's so many things that have proved that, like this Stockholm syndrome, right? People become attached to their captor, right? The mind just kind of latches on to whatever environment it's in. That's the nature of the mind. So, for example, if you train your mind to get up early in the morning, then even though it may be a little uncomfortable, you become attached to it. It just becomes like a habit. You can't, like they say, old habits die hard. That's the mind, because the mind's been set on a particular track. So if you train your mind to eat in a certain way, to wake up at a particular time, to associate with particular groups of people, the mind will just latch on to that. And even if it's not pleasurable to the senses, it just gets hooked onto that. It's a very interesting thing to observe. So it's just a tool, and we have to learn how to train that tool, that instrument. Anyone want to add any more thoughts or questions, or should we continue?
I'll just say, because when we're talking about meditation in the mind, it seems like meditation, the point of meditation is focusing the mind. And so you can see, like, the highest example, the gopis, when Krishna is not present, they see Krishna everywhere. And when Krishna is present, they only see Krishna. So what is their meditation? Their meditation is only on Krishna. So their mind is completely focused in that direction. So bhakti yoga is actually a form of meditation, because when you're practicing bhakti yoga, that is where you're focusing your mind, is on serving the Lord. So, for me, that can be a type of meditation, because it focuses the mind. You're focusing the mind on serving Guru and Gauranga. And in that way, the mind gets accustomed to doing that.
Yes. Okay, we'll read a few more verses.
There's a question from Krishna Jani.
Oh, sorry, I'm on the phone here, so I can't see. So
Are verses 3 and 4 about ascending method, being the doer?
Who is the question from? Krishna and Jani? Oh, Krishna and Jani knows everything. So the question is, are three and sorry, which verses?
3 and 4.
3 and 4, are they referring to the ascending method? Well, it sounds like Krishna and Johnny's asking that question for the sake of the group. I highly suspect. Yes, nicely pointed out, Didi. Yes, for those who are not familiar, we find that there are two main categories of paths of progress which are described in the Vedas. Aroha Panta, which means the ascending path, and Avaroha Panta, which means the descending path. And so, so the ascending path refers to practices which involve making progress through our own endeavor, through our own effort. And whereas Avaroha Panta, descending paths, that refers to practices of bhakti, devotion, which depend upon mercy, descending grace. It's not that we're trying to elevate ourselves by our own effort, our own intellect, our own physical capacity, mental capacity, intellectual capacity, and so on. But we are depending on the higher wave, the higher current to take us up. And ultimately, to enter the highest plane, that is required. Through these ascending paths, we can get a passport. Now, this is the analogy our gurus have used. We can get a passport, by which I mean that we can realize our nature as Atma, as soul. We can come to this kind of like neutral platform. We've left the negative side. We realize we've transcended the lower side. And we've achieved this kind of neutral plane of realizing the soul, but we won't get entrance into a higher country. We need a visa for that. And that's only possible through the descending path. We need the grace. Like if we're going to a country, we need the grace of that country. They don't have any need, but they don't owe us anything. They don't need to let us in. It's their call. It's their grace upon us that they allow us. They give us that stamp of approval. So it is the same idea. No, we need a visa, and that means grace, and that means in the line of bhakti, devotion. That's the only way we can enter the positive sphere, positive eternal world, positive dynamic eternal plane, spiritual plane. So yes, in a simple word, yes, these verses 3 and 4, they're referring to the ascending, aroha panta, ascending path of advancement. Do you want to add anything to that, Krishnandrani? Okay, so we can chant. Okay, so we can chant verses 6 to 10 together. Bandor atmatmanastasya yenaivatmatmana jitaha anatmanastu shachutve varte tatmaiva shachuvat jitatmana prashantasya paramatma samahitaha shitoshna sukha dukeshu tatamana paman nanayoho jnana vijnana chiptatma kutashto vijitandriyaha yukta ityuchate yogi samaloštashma kanchanaha suhin mitra yudasina madhyasta dvesha bandhushu sadhushvapi cha papeshu samabuddhir vishishyate yogi yunjita satatam atmanam rahasi stitaha ekakiyata chittatma nirashir aparigrahaha. Chinmoypu, you want to read those translations 6 to 10?
For one who has conquered the mind, his mind is his friend. For one unable to control the mind, his mind works against him like an enemy. The yogi who has conquered the mind remains deeply absorbed in yogic trance, peaceful and undisturbed by cold and heat, happiness and unhappiness, or honor and dishonor. One who is always satisfied within by both knowledge and realization, who is always fixed in his spiritual nature, who is sense controlled, and who has a vision of a quality for a clod of earth, a rock, or gold. It is said that such a person has attained yoga. Such an eminent yogi has the vision of equality towards a well-wisher, a friend, an enemy, an indifferent person, a mediator, a hateful person, a relative, a saint, and a sinner. The yogi should constantly concentrate his mind by remaining alone in a solitary place, his mind and body controlled, free from desire and acquisition.
So, thank you, Chinmoy Prabhu. So, there are some themes which are repeated, we'll see through Bhagavad Gita. One of them is what we mentioned earlier, that a true state of yoga means to be internally detached. Not necessarily that we are physically renouncing the environment, but we are internally renounced. And physically, we may be engaging with the world. This is one repeated theme. And another one is coming up a lot in these verses we just heard. And that is this conception of duality, having awareness of the duality of this world and realizing that it's all of the same stuff, happy, sad, rich, poor, these are all just different expressions of material experience. It's all dealing with the same thing ultimately, and it's all temporary. It's all to do with the temporary senses and experience of our senses. So we don't need to give so much attention to them. They're not pertaining to the Atma, to the eternal self within. So this is a theme which you'll see comes up again and again in Bhagavad Gita. And normally, we go through these reactions, right, of attraction and repulsion. Oh, this is pleasing to me. I like it. I'm attracted to it. This is displeasing. I reject it. Rag and dvesh, attraction and aversion. Normally, we're kind of cycling between these two reactions in different shades, right? And then by acting on those, we are entangling ourselves further and further in the net of karma in this world. So Bhagavad Gita is again and again making this point. Try to distance yourself from that whole world of mundane duality. Detach yourself from that. And you know, remain remain situated in spiritual vision and spiritual principles. Remember your true identity as Atma, as soul. You are spirit, you are not these senses. So remain aloof to all of these things. Friends, enemies, you know, the realized person is not making a distinction like that. Oh, you did such and such to me, so you're my enemy. And oh, you did that for me, then you're my friend. These are all dealing with temporary ideals. It is all meaningless. These things, they weigh us down, they're like a net. These things are like a net. This analogy of a net is used a lot in the Vedas. These things are like nets that hold us down, bog us, you know, they encumber us, keep us, hold us back from realizing our true nature and true joyful experience. That is our birthright. Even here, to this extent, saint and a sinner. Interesting. Good, and I would say saint in a common sense, someone who is subscribing to ideals of this goodness of this world, of a worldly nature, good, general goodness, which is not pertaining to the true hunger of the soul. You know, it's all on the relative platform. Anyone else want to add anything to that? Chinmoy Prabhu, any thoughts?
Well, I definitely, like, this is why Bhakti Yoga or the Bhagavad Gita is so universal, because it's trying to give something to everybody. So it's people who are, you know, focused in that way with yoga and meditation, Krishna is giving something to them. But later on, we'll see that actually what's most important is heart. And that, and I've heard our gurus say that, like, where the heart goes, the mind will follow. So Krishna is giving all these ideas to kind of create a platform. I know I've heard of just gurus describe it that, trying to create some platform where the Lord can descend. So I remember one time we were taking Madhusudha Maharaj on a preaching tour, and somebody invited us, and we came to their house, and their house was so dirty, just so dirty. And we left Madhusudha Maharaj in the car, and we cleaned his house. But we were never going to go back to that person's house. So in this way too, I think Krishna is saying, like, this is how you create a clean platform. That you want to be at this state in order for some type of divine sentiment to descend. But later on, you'll say too, like, all these things I'm telling you, forget about it. Just worship me. Just love me. Just surrender to me. You know, everything else will come naturally if you get on the plane of the soul, the plane of heart.
Very nice, Prabhu. And yes, it's a very good point, you know, that all of these advices, they are given to help create some solid foundation. But yes, ultimately it is the natural attraction and mood of affection, devotion that will facilitate real progress. So yes, very nice point.
Because you can see in that last one, the yogi should constantly concentrate his mind by remaining alone in a solitary place. That's not for us. At least that's not for me.
Yeah. So yeah, these are specifically referring to practices of Ashtanga yoga. This 10, and then also in these next, going up to verse 14, it's very specifically describing these yoga practices, which are not applicable. So this is a section which we won't extend to bhakti. But we're going along for the ride here. Anyone else want to want to add any thoughts, questions, or anything? And and for me, it gives some insight. We'll read more. But when I read these verses, I think, thank goodness we don't have to do all that. No. We'll see that more in these verses coming up. Okay, then let's continue them. So going over the page to we'll chant verses 11 to 16 together. Shucho deshe pratishtapya stiramasanamatmanaha natyuchicham nati nicham chelajina kushotaram tachaikagram manakritva yata chitandriya kriyaha upavishyasane yunjad yogamatma vishuddhaye samam kayo shiro grivam tadayanachalam stiraha sampreksha nasikagram swam dishaschana valokayan prashantatma vigata bir brahmachari rate stitaha manasamyamya machitto yukta sita matparaha yunjanevam sadatmanam yogini yatamanasaha shantim nirvana paramam matsamstam adhigacchati nat yashnatastu yogosti nachaikantam anashnataha nachati swapnashilasya jagato naiva charjuna. Chinmoy Prabhu, you want to read those verses 11 to 16?
In a clean place, not too high and not too low, the yogi should establish a firm seat of kusha grass, deer skin, and cloth. Then sitting on that seat, subjugating all mental and sensual activity, with one pointed concentration, he should practice meditation or trance in order to purify his heart. Soberly keeping his body, head, and neck straight and upright, poised, the yogi should fix his gaze at one point as though between the eyes, without casting a glance in any direction. Tranquil, fearless, and reposed in the vow of celibacy, he should meditate on me as four-armed Vishnu, and devoting himself to me, he should thus practice yoga. In this way, constantly absorbing his mind in meditation, Dhanya Yoga, the yogi who has ceased hankering for material enjoyment achieves the peace of liberation from mundanity, the peace which abides in me, in my Brahman effulgence.
Verse 16 also.
16 too? Oh, Arjuna, yoga cannot be practiced by one who overeats, undereats, oversleeps, or undersleeps.
So as we said, these verses, they are describing the ascending path. These are good examples of Aroha Panta, how one will try to elevate themselves through their own endeavor, through their own strength. And that is not our line. Here, the emphasis for us, the emphasis is Sharanagati, cultivating the mood of surrender, cultivating a mood of dependency and helplessness in connection with the Lord, with divinity. So not so relevant, but we're getting some insight to these things. Now this 16 is applicable to us. Sorry, did somebody say something there?
Yes, a question and a thought. When you say you have to be quiet in a silent place, because of the world that we live, we have a lot of noise outside, and sometimes we get crazy with all this noise around us. And even though this is more for yoga ashtanga, I believe sometimes keep quiet and listen to ourselves, listen to the present moment, keep us bring us to the path again. This came to me, to my thought, because like the last verse, eating too much or not eating, because of the anxiety the society bring it to us, sometimes we eat a lot. We lose the present moment. We are thinking about the future, and come back, sit in a quiet place, put us in the present moment to remember us what we are doing here and what we are. Thoughts that came to my mind.
Yes. I mean, you're right, and this is also what, this is also connected with sadhana, right? The idea of sadhana, that because we are not in a liberated state, right? We haven't fully embraced the ideal of bhakti, right? When someone has fully entered into the plane of spontaneous devotion, raga marga, free love, and then that's a different matter, but yes, to some extent we do take the help of these kinds of, what ultimately is artificial, from the highest perspective, like say someone's taking time out to be in silence, to be in a quiet area, that's ultimately an artificial thing. However, because we are in a conditioned state, then that can be helpful for us to some extent. This is what following a regulated life is about, following a disciplined style of practice, because we need that. We need that in our present state. So yes, I will agree with you, yes. And this is also what following a sattvic life is about. A sattvic life, a good, a clean, a pure life. That's not ultimately what bhakti is about. But in our current state, it is helpful for us, because we are so much influenced by our environment, so much. So then we may take the help of these things. So yes, I agree with you. And this verse number 16, which you pointed out, yes, that verse is more relevant to us. Yoga cannot be practiced through one who overeats, oversleeps, or undersleeps. So, finding that middle path, having some controlled and regulated way of living, that is recommended. Whatever is supporting our spiritual growth, we will try to take hold of that. Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a tricky point, because on the other hand, there's the mood of to some extent, right? We will try to employ these things, but then but ultimately, the final consideration will be, what is the service need? That the mood of surrender should be predominant, right? What I mean is that we can get into this kind of mood of like artificially creating the environment that's the most supportive, right? Sometimes, right, I see that I can get like that, and I see that in others too, and then things can get too artificial. Like we want to carefully construct. I go to bed at this time, I wake up at this time, this is what I eat, and this is what I do. We can start to become a little too fanatic about that. So leaving some space, like having some general program that we follow, but then also leaving some space for Krishna's plan, Krishna's will, leaving some space for that. And then surrendering also, if we feel that, oh, this isn't really helpful for my spiritual life, but this is what Guru wants from us, or this is the service that's coming to us, then we should also be ready to try to surrender to that, and trusting that the capacity will come, that maybe on one level, there's some nice, Marie always has nice comments. Keep an eye on the chat, everyone. Oh, I lost my train of thought there. Yeah, some space. Yeah, keep some space for what's Krishna's plan. Oh yeah. So I was saying that on one level, okay, for example, like if I were to go and live in a cave, I would never be disturbed. My senses would not be disturbed. Right? But I wouldn't have any service, right? But I will be very peaceful and my senses won't be disturbed if I'm living in a cave. Whereas, let's say I have some service dealing with so many things and people in this world that may agitate my senses sometimes. So in the short term, I may have more disturbance, but in the long term, because I'm connecting with the service current, because I'm connecting with divinity, then in the long term, it's more progressive. In the long term, I'm connecting to something real and it's more progressive. In the short term, I may be agitated in different ways, but in the long term, I'm making a deeper type of progress. So that's another thing that, yes, it is good. I agree with you. We should try to create an environment that is supporting our growth, but we also have to keep that element of surrender, where we're not too rigid, right? We're not too rigid. And we're open to the service that is wanted of us. And we're open to, we're leaving room for the current to come in and take us where it wants to take us. Otherwise it can become, and I've seen that sometimes in practitioners, they kind of draw their lines too firmly. Oh, this is what I do and this is what I don't do. And I go to bed at this time and so on and so forth. And I need to chant 16 rounds. And I'm sorry if you need my help with something, I have to follow my practice, I've seen that sometimes. And I feel that they're disconnecting themselves from the real current. The real current. One analogy Srila Sridhar Maharaj gives in one place is the difference between soldiers that are like in training, who are practicing, right? Like soldiers will have like different what do you call them, like routines that they go through every day, and soldiers who are on the actual battlefield, like playing the real fight, fighting the real fight. So in the same way, we see some practitioners, they go into either of these. Sometimes you will feel that they go very much in one or the other category. Mostly we're a little here and there, but sometimes you see in a very pronounced way, oh, this is someone who's like the practicing soldier. They're just going through the routines, but they're not really connected with the real spirit, the real current. And then other times you see practitioners they're just diving in and they're ready for whatever is necessary at any time. So we, if we get too rigid, our practice becomes dry, and it becomes artificial. So yeah, it's not a straightforward thing, that's for sure. I'm glad that you brought that up. Yeah, and living in the city, that is difficult. It's difficult. I was living in I actually really like some things about living in the city. I think just because there's so many people and you feel so connected with everyone, and it's so easy to connect with people. But yes, the noise and pollution, and it's I know it's challenging. It's difficult. But Saraswati Thakur, he liked that. He didn't like peaceful ashram life. He liked to be right in the center, like his first temple that he opened in Calcutta, it was that he bought, they purchased, it was next to a brothel. Because he'd been trying to buy some other places which were more to his liking, but there was always some problem. And finally that came to him very easily, and he'd say, okay, I just need somewhere. And our Gurudev said, Prabhupada, Saraswati Thakur, he didn't look left or right. He was just looking ahead, And then there was this other occasion when he sent some preachers to London, and they were preaching in the city, and then they started looking into getting a property outside in the countryside, which would be more pleasant. And so Saraswati Thakur heard about it, and he wrote to them and telling them, cancel that. We need to be in the city, in the heart of Maya. We need to be right in the center and connecting with the maximum number of persons as possible. That was Saraswati Thakur's spirit. And our Gurudev also, one time, Janardhan Maharaj, he was saying something about, I think it was in Mexico City or some big city, and Janardhan Maharaj was saying something about the pollution. And then our Gurudev, he said, we are Calcutta men, we do not care. That was our Gurudev's answer. He's fully surrendered, and he's fully transcended, physical experience. And he's just thinking, where's the service? How can I serve? And where are the people? He's not, we have this temple in East London, and, there's a chicken shop on one side, and there's an off license on the other side where they sell, alcohol and cigarettes and everything. And our Gurudev was so content being there. And opposite, on the other side of the street, facing our temple, was this Ken's Cafe, where it's like a takeaway. People come and buy things. And our Gurudev was so fascinated with that place. He'd sit in the temple upstairs looking out the window. And he had this running commentary about this Ken's Cafe, and one of the things he said was how kind of marveling how it's so convenient, the people are so busy and they can just go and get what they need and go back to their work, and and they're buying all kinds of stuff, ham sandwiches and whatever, and really just had this transcendental vision about it. So he wasn't looking for a comfortable life like most of us. I'm very, we were living in Budapest for 3 months, which was a little challenging for me. We're right in the center of the city. And now we have a place which is not fully countryside, but it's semi-countryside, and it's pleasant, and I'm very happy about that. I can walk 15 minutes and come to a beautiful park, and there's a river. I'm so happy about that. But I think about our Gurudev and think, oh, if I can come to that level of surrender. We are Calcutta men, we do not care. It's so phenomenal. We had that experience. It's everything we're reading in Bhagavad Gita is we saw that in our Guru. We saw that, totally beyond the duality of this world.